Brian, for the first time since 2016, we are previewing a bowl game for the Colorado Buffaloes. Colorado has made it down to San Antonio. Let's set the stage for the 2020 Valero Alamo Bowl. What are your overall thoughts as Colorado prepares for a pretty darn good Big 12 opponent?
Yeah, I think great job for Carl Terrell and the players for getting here. I mean, it's obviously been a strange season for everybody. I thought Dave Plati had an interesting stat that CU was the first team ever to go to a bowl game after playing only 5 games. So that tells you what kind of year this has been. It's been a unique year, and I think there's been a lot of discussion. How good are these Buffs really? Through 5 games, it's hard to say. I mean, they didn't play some of the better teams in the Pac-12, but they did what was in front of them and went 4-1. I give them a ton of credit. It's been a fun year covering these guys. It's been a hard year covering these guys, but it's been fun watching them succeed. Well-deserved trip down here, and Texas is a pretty good team. They're depleted though, but this should be an interesting matchup.
It's just crazy. A year ago, had you looked into a crystal ball and seen not only is Mel Tucker not here, Sam Noyer is the starting quarterback, Jarek Broussard is the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year. Just so many weird things beyond COVID that have happened this year. Even Carl Durrell told us that Jarek Broussard wasn't even on their radar, going into camp. It was more like, is he going to factor into the depth chart? It just so much is unexpected about this football team.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about the fact that at signing day, Adam, we don't even have to go back a year. Think about signing day, and I think it was maybe the day after we were down at Blake Street Tavern. Do you remember that for the signing day celebration? And there was all this excitement, and Mel Tucker's excited, and at that point, Sam Noyer's in the transfer portal. Blake Stenstrom was in the transfer portal. It looked like they were just signed Tyler Lewis or Brendan Lewis, but we thought Tyler Latta would be the guy, if not Brendan Lewis. Alex Fontenot coming back, all these things that, like you mentioned, Sam Noyer wasn't on our radar. Jarek Broussard wasn't on our radar. Carl Durrell was not on our radar. So, all these people that have stepped up and played really well, we're not really on our radar. And really, we go back to the start of the season, and maybe I don't remember how you thought about it, but I looked at some of those freshman receivers and thought, I don't think they're even going to get on the field. And Brendan Rice has been, a really big player for this team. So there's a lot of people that have stepped up that have been unexpected for this team. And I think that's what's made this year kind of fun.
Looking at this matchup, I think you start with Sam Ehlinger, veteran quarterback for the Longhorns. He's won all 3 bowl games that he's been the starter in. Put up huge numbers. Chip Brown, that covers Texas for 24/7 Sports, said that he's not going to go down as one of the all-time greats for Texas just because he never led them to a conference title, but a very solid quarterback. He's got dual threat capabilities, which we've seen cause issues for Colorado in the past. And, that Texas running game is pretty good. They've got a couple talented backs, and they're going up against obviously a Nate Landman-less Colorado defense. That Longhorns offense has been putting up 40.5 points a game in 10 regular season games. We'll get into our predictions later, but the first thing that I feel about this game is that Texas is going to put up some points.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, this Colorado defense, I like what they've done. They've done some nice things. They've gotten better. A lot of it was Nate Landman, though, and not all of it, but, he was such a big part of it. I think Carson Wells has been extremely underrated this season. When you look at the Pac-12 awards, I couldn't believe that the coaches didn't name him first or second team. And, second team by the media, which is more well-deserved. But, I had a vote and I put him first team. I thought he was deserving there. There's been some guys that have played well, Adam, but this is a group that, has had its ups and downs. And, frankly, Ty Jordan, the late Ty Jordan, unfortunately, I mean, it's such a tragic situation there this weekend. But, he had a huge game against the Buffs in their last game, and that 66-yard run to kind of seal things there at the end of that game. I don't know if things like that happen with Nate Landman on the field, and that's not as much of a knock on John Van Diest or Marvin Ham or those other linebackers, but it's more a compliment to Nate Landman, who has such great instincts that I think he fills that hole, where Jordan or Bijan Robinson or somebody like that would run through. So I think they're going to miss him quite a bit, but at the same time, Adam, they've had a couple weeks to prepare now without Nate, and I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to Tyson Summers because we've seen him do some good things, make some good in-season adjustments in the last 2 years. I'm curious to see what he cooks up for this defense and what adjustments he makes.
I was going to say, if Tyson Summers can get this defense prepared to hold Texas under 35 points, that's a win in my book. Just given after the Utah game, it was almost like we were reading a eulogy talking about Nate Landman's injury. It was that impactful for this football team. But sticking with Colorado's defense, and underrated, obviously Carson Wells was by the Pac-12 coaches, but CU's defensive line has done the grunt work this year. And up until that second half against Utah, they had done really well against the run. I guess there was a few long runs by Arizona as well, but by and large, that group has done a lot of hard work in the trenches to let Carson Wells and Nate Landman before he got hurt to look like All-American types out there. And I thought Mekhi Blackman was underrated. I'm surprised that he wasn't at least honorable mention all conference. And then Isaiah Lewis, speaking of guys that have really stepped up that we just didn't expect anything out of, has really stepped up as well. And Brian, we haven't noticed Christian Gonzalez as much recently. Now, this is the toughest test for those guys. Blackman and Christian Gonzalez are really going to have to show up on Tuesday night. But it's not like CU's defense is void of playmakers, even with Landman out.
No, they're not. And we should, I'm glad you said that, because there are playmakers there and there are good pieces there. And all those guys you mentioned. I mean, on the defensive line, Mustafa Johnson got some all-conference nominations. Terrence Lang has played well. And, but look for guys like Janaz Jordan, who has been a starter the last few games. He's played pretty well when he's got in there for Jalen Sammy. Look for guys like him to maybe step up in this game. Some of those younger defensive linemen, they're going to need those guys to step up. But you're right. This secondary has had good moments. Christian Gonzalez has gotten better. Mekhi, I think, has been really good this season. He gave up one big pass against Utah, but that's about all I remember him really giving up this year.
That was a really tough catch, too.
It was a tough catch, yeah. And it was like a 30-yard pass, something like that. But that's about all he's given up this year. He's played really well. And Darian Rayshaw's had his ups and downs, but he's a good leader back there. So I'm curious to see what they do. I mean, this is their toughest test, though. I mean, Sam Ehlinger is – he's not in the Heisman conversation. He's not going to be one of the top quarterbacks picked in the draft, but he's a winner, and he's a guy that's he's got 2 bowl game MVPs under his belt, and he's one of the few. I think he's one of 2 FBS quarterbacks to rush for throw for 1,000 yards or 11,000 yards and rush for 1,500, and the other one is Colt McCoy. So. I don't know if it's FBS or what it is, but whatever it is, he's in company with Colt McCoy, one of only 2 to do something. So he's a pretty good player, and I think this is going to be a really big test for this defense.
Looking at Colorado's offense versus Texas's defense, Texas has given up points this year, and they're without some of their top defensive players that have opted out to get ready for the NFL draft. Colorado, we talked about Jarek Broussard being the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year. Sam Neuer, when he's been good, he's been really good. He has had some mistakes that he's made. He's been baited into some bad interceptions here in the last couple of games. What do you look to from this matchup with Colorado's offense going up against their defense?
Yeah, it'll be interesting with that because they've had so many starters opt out, like you said, whether it's for the NFL draft. They had a starting safety that decided he wanted to play receiver instead, so he'll be playing receiver for this game. In fact, Texas's top receiver, by the way, opted out. Is going to the NFL draft as well as their left tackle. So they've got a lot of holes they've got to fill, but it's mostly on defense. They've got such good athletes there, though, Adam. I'm just curious how they're going to be able to get those athletes ready to go for a bowl game in such short notice. A lot of those guys have played a little bit, but not quite as much as they're going to have to this week. I think this is a big opportunity for Sam Neuer, for Darren Chiaverini to come up with a good game plan and take advantage of those young guys. And if they can, I think the Bucs can have some success on offense.
Brady Russell might be back in the mix. That would be a huge addition, I think, to this offense, just to have a guy out there that can create some mismatches. Obviously, he had a great season opener against UCLA before getting hurt. What are your expectations there? If he does play, how big of a boost is that for this offense?
Well, I will say earlier today I saw some photos from down there. He is in San Antonio, so that's a good sign that he made the trip. I would love to see him play. I've always enjoyed watching Brady play, and if he can play anything like he did in that first game, that's going to be huge for this offense. I think if he plays, it means he's probably pretty close to 100%, and I would imagine that Sam's going to rely on him a little bit and throw him 4 or 5 passes and probably in some big spots. So I would look for Brady Russell if he plays to have a pretty big role.
The motivation factor is so hard to gauge, and you look at this game, Texas is really not that excited to play in this game. They were in the Alamo Bowl last year. Colorado is super pumped to be in this game. It's the second bowl game they've been in the last 13 years. How much does that factor in to this game, do you think?
I'll go back to 4 years ago when we were kind of saying the same thing in that game, that Colorado's going to be super pumped to play because it's been so long. They've been in a bowl. Oklahoma State was in like their 12th straight bowl, and Oklahoma State was disappointed because they lost the Big 12 championship game, and we thought that same thing. And Oklahoma State went out there and really took it to the Buffs. So I don't think it plays a huge role. Coach Tom Herman for Texas talked about it, that in some ways this is the turning of the page for Texas because of those young guys we mentioned they're going to be playing. But those seniors and guys like Sam Ehlinger and some of those other seniors, they're 3-0 in bowls in their career, and they're going to be motivated to go 4-0. So I think there is some motivation there for Texas. And only 11,000 fans there, but I imagine there's going to be a lot of burnt orange in the stands. There was a lot of Oklahoma State fans down in San Antonio when we were down there 4 years ago, Adam. I imagine it won't be more because there's fewer fans, but the higher percentage, I think, will be burnt orange down there. And so I think it's a tough environment for the Buffs. And, so I don't think it really plays that big of a role.
I mentioned Chip Brown. He said, Colorado's basically getting a sneak peek at Texas's roster for next year. And to your point, those guys are going to want to have a strong impression out there, right? Because they're kind of playing for what their role is going to be in 2021. Both teams have had COVID-19 issues. We don't know exactly how many Longhorns players are not going to be in the mix. It's going to be at least 2 is what we're hearing. It might be a little bit more than that. Colorado, since Texas is not putting out the information of who's not playing, even though I've heard some things there, I'm going to respect Carl Durrell in the program and not put that out there just because that's not so very smart in my shoes to put that information out there. But we do know that Colorado's been dealing with that as well.
Yeah, both these teams are going to be, down a few key guys because of COVID, and that's just kind of the nature of this season. And luckily, the good thing, Adam, is that it appears it's not going to cause this game to be canceled. And the Buffs were healthy enough to make the trip. I think probably like a lot of Buff fans, I've been looking at some of the pictures and videos, like, okay, who is there? And okay, this guy, this is a key guy. He's there, so that's good. So yeah, both are impacted. I think Texas is more depleted, maybe not only by COVID, but with all those opt-outs. So they're going to be heavily impacted. I mean, CU's had 2 opt-outs, but they were both true freshmen, one of which hadn't played yet, and the other one had 7 carries in the year. So, I think Texas is going to be more impacted by opt-outs and COVID and things like that. But, certainly, CU's – we haven't seen CU be hit that much this year, Adam. I mean, there was Kari Kutch, missed 1 game because of that. Or no, it was 2 games that he missed because of that. I don't remember what it was, 1 or 2. But, they really haven't missed any starters because of COVID. They've been really lucky this year. It sounds like this might be the first time that happens.
And Chris Miller has actually put it out on social media, so I guess we can talk about it. He said that he's got COVID. He can't he's lost some of his senses, but he had been dealing with a shoulder injury as well. I don't think we would have expected much from him going into this game anyway.
The disappointing thing, I think, real quick on him, the disappointing thing for him is that he's one of those 22 Texas guys that, that he's not able to, go to this bowl game, because of that. So I feel bad for him that it's a bowl game in Texas that he can't at least try to go. And we've seen him in warmups, Adam, in the last few games. And so I'd imagine that he would have, maybe been healthy enough to at least try to give it a go. And so I feel bad for him that he's not able to do that. But you're right. He hasn't played a whole lot this year anyway.
Unfortunately, we've been feeling bad for Chris Miller pretty much his whole career. So hopefully at some point he can kind of get over that hump.
And such a good kid too. And I hope he can get over that hump and have a good 2021.
What's interesting here is Carl Durrell. This is his 6th year as a head coach in college. He's led a team to a bowl game all 6 years. Tom Herman similarly has led his team to a bowl game every year he's been a head coach. It just shows you, and you look at Tom Herman, he's on the hot seat. Carl Durrell was fired at UCLA. It just shows you how tough it is to be successful as a head coach in college football.
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about the Texas fans and their expectations in a previous video, but yeah, it's tough when you're down at Texas, and they do have expectations of national titles and beating Oklahoma, things like that. And yeah, great, thanks. Go to the Alamo Bowl 2 years in a row, but there's fans that want him gone. That certainly I don't think is the case for Colin Durrell. I think Buff fans are 100% behind him at this point. But yeah, 5 bowls in 5 years at UCLA, and yeah, well, thanks, but USC is winning championships, so you're out of here, Carl. So that it's a tough business, but I credit both these coaches. They've done a good job. They've been winners throughout their careers.
Not only that, it took 13 years for Carl Durrell to get his next opportunity. I know he's a little bit off the radar just being in the NFL, but again, It just shows you how cutthroat that business is. The odds makers set the line with Texas favored by 12, and that's moved down below 10 points as we're recording. It's 9.5. To me, that sounds about right. Again, it's a really tough game to handicap, though, just given the opt-outs, the COVID issues, and all that.
Yeah, and I imagine that's why the line moved. I mean, I'm not a gambler. I'm not an expert on that stuff, but it seems to me like that would be why the lines moved, because of all these guys that are out for Texas, and maybe that weakens them a little bit. But I think that's right where it belongs. I mean, I think Texas is the strongest team CU's faced all year. And Sam Ehlinger, to me, is the best quarterback they faced all year, and that can be a big difference. So, and Texas has shown up in bowl games. I mean, we saw them last year. They really took it to a pretty good Utah team, and 2 years before that, they upset Georgia, and in both those games they were the underdogs. So they step up in these games and they play well.
All right, let's get into our predictions, Brian. I mentioned earlier I expect a shootout here. I expect a lot of fireworks down there in San Antonio. I don't see a way without Nate Lamb, the Colorado's defense, unless they create a lot of turnovers and get some momentum earlier, is going to be able to stop this Texas offense consistently throughout the game. I do think the Buffs will get some things rolling, though, going against Texas's defense, especially with those opt-outs. I'm going to go Texas 41, Colorado 35.
All right. Well, I agree with you on the defense side. I think they're going to struggle there. I am curious to see what Tyson Summers does, throw some wrinkle in there to try to cover up for missing Nate and try to help those guys out. But I still think Sam Ehlinger is really good, and they've got a lot of weapons. Bijan Robinson might be the best running back they've seen all year. I think Texas is going to score. As far as the CU offense, the last 3 games, Adam, they have not done a whole lot, and we've kind of seen this pattern with CU, where they start hot in the first few games of the year, and then they kind of tail off, and it's not a very explosive offense. And I think we're seeing that, and I don't know if they're going to get it back against Texas. This defense is missing a lot of people, and they're not an unbelievable defense anyway, right? But I still think CU is going to struggle to score a little bit. I'm going to go Texas 34, Colorado 20.
All right. Obviously, 5-1 looks a lot better than 4-2. Does the outcome of this game have a huge impact, do you think, on the CU football program going forward? Obviously, it helps. Any type of momentum, especially on the recruiting side, helps. But does it make a big difference going forward?
I don't think so. I do think that a win can make a big difference. I don't think a loss is going to hurt this program, because the expectations were not that high anyway. They're expected to lose this game. As you mentioned, it's almost a 10-point spread. I think as long as they're competitive, as long as they don't get blown out. I mean, if it's 45-0 or something like that, then maybe that hurts things. But I think they've done enough good things, Adam, that the outcome of this game doesn't really matter, and that this is really just this is a nice reward for these guys for a good season, and go out there and try to win a football game. But if they win it, I think it could be pretty big, because you're in Texas. There could be a recruiting impact there, not just in Texas, but you're looking at those California kids that are probably looking at CU, and if they could beat a Texas, that's got to look good. So I think it can have a positive effect. I don't think it's going to have a big negative effect. What do you think?
I think the benefits of a win are so much more than the negatives of a loss in this, especially given the recent history of CU football, just because, you can keep going back to, we got into a bowl game, which was something that we were really struggling to do on a consistent basis. And then it becomes, okay, you gotta string these seasons together. It can't be 2016 and then you go back to 5-7 3 years in a row. You've got to continue to build on that, which is unfortunately Mike McIntyre wasn't able to do that. So that's the key. But being able to beat Texas, especially recruiting in Texas, would be a big deal for them. No question about it. Just kind of reflecting on this year, I give a lot of credit to Colorado's players and Carl Durrell and the staff for being able to be as COVID-free as they were. There's been a few issues here recently, but by and large, it's really impressive. I can't imagine. I'm burned out, Brian, covering this team over Zoom. I miss human interaction and all that. And CU Sports Information Department did a great job this year. But I can't imagine how exhausted these players are at this point. And even Carl Durrell said, I just can't wait to exhale. It's been such a long road, having to be on standby mode and cancellations. No matter what happens on Tuesday night, a lot of credit goes to this whole program.
Yeah, and I'm going to credit programs all around the country. I mean, Tom Herman mentioned it, that there's going to be a collective sigh of relief the morning of the 30th coming from his program because they don't have to do this anymore. And we haven't gotten into this with Coach Durrell. I don't know when they're going to start up again in January and have to start doing testing again, but at least after Tuesday, these guys don't have to get tested, I would imagine, for at least a couple of weeks where they can take a break. And I agree with you. It's been exhausting for us in a lot of ways. This is the longest, toughest, shortest season that we've ever covered. But at the same time, we're not getting tested every single day. I've been sitting right here, all these videos we've done, I've got this same backdrop. You've had that same backdrop. We've been wearing sweats in our basements for months. So it's not that bad for us, but it's still been difficult. I can't imagine what they're going through. I give them a lot of credit, and I'm just glad they get to go down there and do this. I can totally understand all those teams that opted out because I think it's been such a grind. But I think that for the Buffs, I'm glad they're able to go down there, spend a couple of days in San Antonio, and have an extra game, get the rewards of a bowl game, and hopefully they can get a win along with that.
I think maybe the good thing that comes from 2020 in the pandemic is that when things finally get back to normal, I know for myself at least, I'm going to not take things for granted, maybe like you do in normal life. And I just can't wait to get back to, being able to get out to Folsom Field. I know we were lucky enough to cover a few games, but just getting there and being able to be around practice and BS a little bit and kind of be around people. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's little things like, my son is 10 and, he's gotten into the Buffs. And, as we've talked about in these videos before, he was able to meet James Stefano. And that's because of things like, you and I got to know James a little bit because outside the gates, we'd stand there and talk to him for a few minutes, right? And so he was asking me, well, could I meet this kid? I'm like, well, I don't know him. I've only done a Zoom interview with him, so I don't really know him. So I miss things like that, like just chit-chatting with a James Stefano or Steven Montez or guys like that just outside the gates and with you and Justin and all the guys covering the team. So there's a lot of things we miss, and looking forward to maybe spring ball will be a little bit different, but certainly. Yeah, I'm with you that CU Sports Information did everything they could. I think they were great for us, but it's been a tough year.
No doubt. Well, Brian, have safe travels down there. We're ready to turn the page to 2021, but we still have a game left, the Alamo Bowl on Tuesday night.
Hey, it's showtime, baby. Texas, baby. We here.